just wanted to say actually one thing before we start, because I was eating the cookie. If you go back a million years ago, there used to be a thing called cassettes. Remember cassettes? No? Oh, you're too young. Cassettes. These little things you used to put them in a machine and they would record, and then sometimes the tape would come out. You need to use your pencil to kind of roll them back in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yes, you know, it was in the time of the dinosaurs they had these. So when I used to teach, and as these were being developed, people would come in my class and they would say, oh, so-and-so can't come to the class today. Do you mind if I record for him or her? No, don't mind. So there'd be one tape recorder. After a couple of months, there'd be like 8 or 9 tape recorders. But of course, you know, there'd still be people. But every time the tape recorder would end, you would hear a click. And that's how the person knew they had to come running up to the front of the room, open it up, turn the cassette around, close it, push play, and continue. So I always thought about the person now back in their room getting the cassette, and they listen to it, and it ends, and then they turn it over, and they play. So I used to always, whenever I hear the click, I would wait, and then when they start again, I would begin by saying, and that is the whole purpose of creation. Imagining the person back in the rewind. Oh my gosh, I missed that whole part, you know? So that was then. Then I realized there was another level in teaching, and that was people would fall asleep in the class. I would call it the sound of the hollow coconut falling. You would suddenly hear boom, and you would look, and somebody's head had just hit the table like a coconut coming down off a tree. So I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could figure out a way to also sleep while I'm teaching? I mean, why should just the students be able to go to sleep? Why can't the teacher go to sleep? You know, have like these little like toy eyes or something, so it looks like you're awake, but really, but you know, and like a little something here that just sort of talks, but it's really coming from over there. And you really, okay, why did I say all of this? That was simply because I had to desperately run and get a cookie. That was, and then I felt bad because it's really not nice to eat in front of the class. Had nothing to do with reincarnation. It may, if it was a bad cookie, have something to do with regurgitation, but certainly not reincarnation. Okay, now that I've totally confused all of you, let's go back to our subject. I want to, last time we were just talking about a little bit about the whole idea of who cares, really, seriously. You know, one of the things about us Jews, and I'm sure we're not the only people, we really are, in a way, engineers. In other words, we view the spiritual world as a science. It's not, you know, when I know, like when I'm with my American friends, they use terminology like, well, what do you believe? And I say, well, it really doesn't matter what I believe, right? It's like, it's more, what is it? It's like saying, do you believe in electricity? Well, gee, I don't know if I really believe in electricity. Well, it has nothing to do with your belief. It either is or it isn't. You might not have discovered yet what electricity is and how it works, but that doesn't mean that its reality is dependent on your belief. And so therefore, anything which is dependent on belief, as funny as this may sound, is really of little interest to a Jew. Because even the word belief, I think we spoke about this in one of our other classes, which is the famous word that everyone forgets is Hebrew, amen, or amen. So that, or as our, you know, new Congress in the United States said, or a woman. So amen, or a woman, to which many people then said, or a moron. But anyhow, amen is the word for faith, but it's connected to the same word as the word for truth, emet. The only difference between faith and truth is that in faith, you're still in the process of discovering the truth because you haven't gotten to the last letter yet. But all of the elements of your faith are built on concrete, understandable truths on the way to the total truth. It's not based upon blind faith. It's not based upon leap of faith. It's based upon accruing knowledge. So therefore, when one were to talk about reincarnations, the first thing that a guy who sits and learns in yeshiva would probably say is, who cares? What difference does it make? So therefore, what we need to do is figure out what difference it does make. And then by doing that, we will understand where and how reincarnation is a very, very important element. I even prepared a little gift surprise for the class as well, but I'll save that towards the end. And I just hope the Google Chinese translation doesn't stink, but that was all I could use. But I also put the English and the Hebrew in there, so you can maybe double check it. But anyhow, the reason reincarnation is important is not in order to go back and discover that, you were the princess of Romania in the 16th century. Because while that information sounds groovy and maybe it makes a nice movie, it really, it doesn't do anything for you. When we go upstairs after 120 years of living in this world, God's not going to ask us about having been a princess in Romania. It's going to be about who you were now in this world, in this life. What did you do in this life? That's what everything is all about. Because who you are in this world, in this life, is what you can be responsible for. Now, it is true in the same way that the DNA is handed down to you from your parents, and therefore from your grandparents, and so on and so on, and that impacts you. There is also a truth that the earlier incarnations also impact who we are. And as I explained in last class, which is the difference between the Buddhist concept of reincarnation and Jewish concept, and I want to drill down a little bit more on it. And again, I do not put myself in any way, shape, or form as an expert in Buddhism, although I wish I was. Still, there, it's more the idea of a spirit, of a ruach, of a wind, the soul being more of a wind. And we use the analogy of like a snail that picks up a shell, and then it picks up another shell, and it picks up another shell. It's that inner body that's moving between the shells, which is like the wind of the spirit of being. But as Jews, we look at it as much more than that. It's actually a soul. And the difference between a soul and a spirit, first of all, on the 5 levels of this soul in Hebrew, neshama, is higher than ruach. It's a much higher level because neshama, soul, has a deeper level of wisdom associated with it. And therefore, it's not merely blowing from one body to the next body to the next body. It's actually processing information in each one of those experiences that evolve the soul into hopefully a higher entity that now works on another level, and then hopefully on a higher level, to the point, which we talked about last time also, you don't come back. You don't want to, really, in Judaism, it's not a good thing to be reincarnated. It might be a practical reality, but it just simply means you didn't pass your math exam, and now you have to come back for summer school. So, and I'm sure nobody liked to blow off their summer on the beach by sitting there and doing algorithm equations. So it's the same thing idea. You could be out there like playing in 18,000 other inhabited planets, or you could be sentenced back to life on Earth. But whatever, here we are. And so here we are, therefore means that we understand that this idea of this Gilgul, this reincarnation, whatever it was that we have learned, impacts us. Now, I want to just jump out of the box for a minute, share something with you for a perspective purpose only, and then come back to this thought that we're on now. I think I've said this a few times in our getting together, but do not be a prisoner to linear time. linear time is very important and it functions. And that's about the only way you're going to be able to work on your Google or Apple calendar is linear time. But it's, imagine if you learn how to play chess and then all of a sudden somebody comes along and teaches you how to play three-dimensional chess. I don't know if anybody ever has done that, but if you ever play 3D chess with two boards, one above the other, you have to break your brain, lose everything you've understood, and now come up with a new, fresh approach, because otherwise you're not going to be able to last for a second. So the same idea, if you can get out of linear time, then that understanding means that there is no past and future. Everything becomes, which is God's holy name of Yud-Keh Vav-Keh, everything becomes now. And I think the analogy we used when I was talking about this in the other context was visualize items on the table in front of you. So I have a mouse and I have a book. When I look at this, I say my mouse is to my left and my book is to my right. However, I could also say that the distance between the mouse on my table and the book on my table is 1 second or 2 seconds apart. Because for the book, for me to put the mouse on the book, I can't do it in the linear time now. Can't do it. I require linear time to move the mouse to the book. But in non-linear time, I don't think in terms of time, I just look at it as positions. So from a reincarnation point of view, often a primitive approach to reincarnation is linear time, because that's what most people are locked into. What can you do? It's what they are. It's okay. However, linear time assumption of reincarnation is the person's born, they do what they do, and then they die, and then they come back, and then they do what they do. Okay. Non-linear reincarnation could be the opposite. A person could be born in the year 1980 and they could die in the year 2070, and then they could be reincarnated in the year 5. Because only in linear time is the year 5 in the past. In non-linear time, 5 or 500 or whatever, it's all now. So therefore, a reincarnation's function, or actually I don't really like to say feng shui, because that's really kind of what it is in a way, because in the same way you do feng shui in the house and you put the mirrors and you control the movement of the air in the house and so on, so too your reincarnation is being carefully crafted and designed perfectly for what you need to do in this episode of all of your lives in this TV show called Earth. So therefore, your parents, are you Chinese? Are you a Jew boy from New York? Are you from Nigeria or wherever you are from? All of these choices are done specifically. The level of your wisdom, everything, your body, your soul, your friends, everything is custom designed to the nth degree of perfection in order to enable you to do whatever the tikkun, which we're going to talk about in a few more minutes, you need to do. Tikkun in Hebrew means to fix, to rectify. Well, maybe I'll even insert it now, because I know we're in like a sub-level of what we were talking about, but I'll just do a little mini sub-level of the sub-level before we come back to the idea we're really at hand. So the little mini sub-level of tikkun in Hebrew, Rabbi Nachman of Breslev points out that there's probably an infamous holiday in the Jewish calendar known as the 9th day of the month of Av, or in Hebrew we call it Tish B'Av, which is again 9 of Av. This was the infamous day on which both the first and second temples of Jerusalem, the first one being King Solomon, second one being Ezra, were destroyed, first by the Babylonians and then by the Romans. Okay. On that infamous day is a prayer book, which is only used once a year. And until recently, in Jewish tradition, the prayer book was always printed on very inexpensive, flimsy paper. The idea being, by printing this on such a cheap book, it made a statement that we will not need it next year. Whatever. That book is called keynote. I guess if you were to use English letters, it might be K-I-N-O-T. Not to be confused with a guy who gets up in front of a lot of people and he's the keynote speaker. Here, the keynote means to cry. So it's a prayer of crying for the loss of God's house in this world. And without that house comes darkness and confusion and all the rest of it. And you know, when you're in a dark room, you don't really know what's in the room. And you imagine things like boogeymen and monsters and other things because it's dark. So that's why we cry. However, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov points out that the same letters in Hebrew that spell the word keynote also are used to spell the word tikkun, which means to repair. And the lesson he teaches is, if you are aware that you broke something, you should know that you have the power to fix it. Because if you don't have the power to fix it, what are you crying for? Right? As a kid in America, we used to say, don't cry over spilled milk, because there's no way you're going to get the milk up and back in the bottle. It's finished. It's over. So why cry? King David cried like crazy when his firstborn child from Bathsheba was ill. But the moment the baby died, King David jumped up as if nothing had happened, because what else could he do at that point? The crying wouldn't be functional anymore. Obviously, we're not robots. We are not on as high a spiritual level as a King David. But nonetheless, the idea is something we share. If we cry, it means because there has to be something that we can find, look for the tools to fix it. So too, now we're coming back to our subsection of nonlinear time and reincarnation. So too, when you come, not you, God forbid, when a person comes back reincarnated, they're coming back to do tikkun, to fix. Now, this is another little subsection of our subsection before we get back to our main class, but it's another very important point. And that is, again, from a Jewish perspective, there are two things that happen when a person makes a mistake. I like the word mistake better than the word sin, especially because China in Hebrew is called sin. So God forbid, it should have a horrible connotation, which is not at all the case. I would translate the word sin in your case as happy, wonderful, beautiful, great people, unbelievable nature, etc. But in the meantime, so let's use the word mistake. So when a person makes a mistake, here, let's do this as an analogy. You get really upset, you're in somebody's house and you get so upset, you go over and you take their 4th century Ming Dynasty vase and smash it on the ground. Now, assuming that you're still alive after you do that, because the owner of it didn't happen to waste you. So there are two things that you need to do, or should do. First and foremost is apologize. Oh my gosh, I was crazy. How could I ever have done that? I'm so sorry. And depending on the level of how sincere you are, will probably depend on how forgiven you will be. And many times, at least in American courts, believe it or not, the regret expressed by the guilty party can actually affect how severely that person might be sentenced to a jail term, which is why before the assigning of the punishment, the defendant in American court, at least, is always allowed to make one comment, because it's a chance to express something, which many times when you hear so-and-so had no regret for the people he killed, whatever, that guy, they throw him and the key away forever. But somebody who really, really you can see, and obviously there are levels of regret, but you see it's coming from deep in their soul, it has an impact. But there's another element. Even if the person completely and sincerely apologized, I mean, really sincerely, it still needs what we call in Hebrew kapara, or atonement. In other words, there's still a broken vase. So the broken vase either has to be financially compensated so that the person can buy another one, or somehow or another, probably as difficult as Humpty Dumpty, somehow you put it all back together again. But it's not merely enough to say you're sorry. It's two things. It's the regret, and it's also the tikkun. So therefore, even in the level of a person making a lot of mistakes in this world and then coming upstairs, and then at that, oh, sorry, just turn off this little noisemaker here. So in the same level, when a person comes upstairs, at that moment, that person may be expressing a tremendous amount of regret. Nonetheless, there's still damage that's been done, and the damage has to be fixed. And so that's where normally reincarnation comes into play. Now, I will share this on a very interesting, but kind of a side story, but it illustrates this in a very, very deep way. The Baal Shem Tov teaches us, the Baal Shem Tov quotes that there is a tremendous commandment in the Torah to give somebody the benefit of the doubt. In Hebrew, it's called dan lachaf zchut. It means to dan, which is to judge. Lekaf, kaf means a hand, but also when you have scales, you have two hands, if you will. So judge to the side of giving the person the benefit of the doubt. Now, that doesn't mean turning a blind eye to evil. That only means when there is a doubt. If it's clear that somebody, you walk in the room and there's the guy with his hand in the cash register stealing money, so there's no doubt what's going on. But if there's a doubt and you don't know, so, somebody says something to you and it bothers you, and you look at their face and they, so, there, you don't know. Maybe he's got like a ingrown toenail or a splitting migraine headache. So since you really don't know, even though on the surface it looks like one thing, you could give the benefit of the doubt. And there are many amazing stories in the Talmud of Rabbi Akiva in circumstances that seem to be so clearly against him, but he gave the man the benefit of the doubt. And in the end, all those benefits turned out to be the true story. So based on this, the Baal Shem Tov teaches us a very deep idea. Now, when a person comes upstairs after 120 years, there's an expression, I don't know if it's in China, but there's an expression known in the Western world a lot, and it's certainly in Judaism, which is when just at the moment when a person's about to die, their entire life flies before their eyes. Again, non-linear time. So in linear time, the experience might be like that, but non-linear time, it could seem like your whole life a second time over. If you've ever, God forbid, been in a horrible car accident, which I have, thank God, and I'm here to tell the story. When the car is going through whatever it's going through, when you're inside that car, it's like slow motion. It's really like, whoa, even though in real life, it's bam, but in where you are, it's a whole different relationship to, or maybe something like that. It's a whole different relationship to time. So when a person's watching their whole life, it can be like, ooh, whoa, he's 5 years old. And then when I was 15, and then look at 25, and right, you're it. But on the outside, the doctor says, no, he's dead. But for you, it's like their whole life goes before your eyes. Okay. And really, God does not judge us. We judge ourselves. How does it work? So it doesn't work where you really see your own life. Because if you did, or at least if it was me, card player, you got all the cards, you know when to throw down the ace and when to, you know how to play cards. So somebody comes to criticize you, woohoo, you've got all the answers, all the excuses, you're the spin doctor, no problem. So God knows that we do that. So what happens is as follows. Based on a story in the Bible, when King David had taken Bathsheba from Uriah Hittite and took care as his wife, so the prophet Nathan or Nassan came in to criticize him. But how did he do it? I'm sure you know the story. He comes in and says to King David, a horrible thing has just taken place. There was a very rich man with all kinds of animals, and he wanted to have a big party for his friends, and he sent his workers across the street to the very poor woman who only had one lamb and stole her only lamb and served that lamb. And King David jumped up outraged, pulls out his sword. Who is this man? And the prophet says, it's you, King David. King David says, what? He says, yes, you have all of these wives, and you had to take Uri Hachiti's only wife of Bathsheba? And then if you look carefully, at least in a Jewish Bible, you will see there's a large gap that was actually left there intentionally, which is almost never done. And the sages ask, why is that gap there? Because at that moment, David was doing a tikkun, a fixing of the original sin. How could he do it? Because he was a reincarnation of Adam. And therefore, in that case, the value of knowing that his soul was a reincarnation of Adam meant that he knew he had a hands-on opportunity to fix what Adam had done wrong. What had Adam done wrong? What, from the Jewish perspective, was the original sin? Well, we know other people that are very into the Bible. They will tell you the original sin was eating the apple. Of course, they'll never really stop to realize that there were no apples in that part of the world, but that's a little minor detail. So, like they say in New York, don't confuse me with facts. So, but there is this idea that some eating took place. But from a Jewish perspective, that was not the sin. Why? Because it's human to make a mistake. Even an intentional mistake, it's human. It's okay. What's not okay is to not apologize and make amends. That's not okay. So when God came to Adam and said to him, hey, what's up with this? You can just imagine the scene, right? Like God frisks, like they say, the police, they frisk you and they found the half-eaten apple, right? So they cuffing him and taking him off. So he says, what's with the apple thing? And instead of saying, you're right, I've made a terrible mistake, he blames Eve. And Eve blames Vinny, the snake, right? So what's that? That's the sin. The sin should have been, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It would have been fine. Because eating's not wrong. It's just that's what we do. We're not angels. We're humans. We make mistakes. But it's also paro arrogance to not accept that mistake. So therefore, in the case now with King David, it was the same idea. Was King David going to stand up and apologize for his mistake? Or was he going to come up with an excuse? That's what that empty space represents. And of course, we know next words, if you look where it picks up, I have sinned. That was the tikkun of Adam. And because of that, his soul becomes reincarnated in the future as the Messiah, or we call in Hebrew, Mashiach. And if you look in Hebrew at the name Adam or Adam, the three letters in Hebrew that spell Adam are Aleph for the name Adam, Daled for David, and Mem for Mashiach. It's all the same soul, and each one rectifies the other. So, having said that, therefore, and coming back now to this idea of non-lineal time, which requires the tikkun for us to be able to fix the things that we've done, and therefore everything is custom designed. So, if you just want to have fun for a minute, guy's born, and when he's in the little baby carriage in the hospital maternity ward, the baby in the next carriage over is the reincarnation of the life that this little baby hasn't lived yet. Right? Why not? There's no linear time. The baby hasn't even lived yet. And not only that, we don't even know what the baby's going to do, but whatever he's going to do and whatever the tikkun is going to be necessary, the little baby in the next thing is already him reincarnated, because it's not dependent on linear time. And therefore, the nature of reincarnation isn't even dependent on human life. According to a very great Hasidic book called Yismach Moshe, a person can come back reincarnated as an animal, can come back reincarnated as a inanimate item, let's say vegetation, or can even come back as a inanimate item, such as a rock. For example, in the Bible, very strange stories. Yaakov is waiting by the well, and it says, well, I guess if you were going to write the Bible in ye old biblical English, it would say, and lo and behold, there comes Rachel, with her father's flock. And it says that Yaakov was very excited to see Rachel and the flock. Really? What was the excitement? Because the animals represented money. Therefore, he thought, oh, okay, good. I see that they've got like a good, solid bank account here with 1,000 head of sheep or whatever. Hardly that should mean anything to Yaakov. So is it that he loved animals so much that he looked at animals as if they were human? Doubt it. So what was he so happy about? Because he could see who had been reincarnated into each one of those animals. And so therefore, he was able to identify the root of the souls of these animals. And there are many, many, many crazy, crazy, crazy mystical stories about the animals that were processed inside the temple, of them speaking in conversations with the Kohanim, with the priests, and all sorts of different things that were going on as they were being elevated. Now, interestingly enough, we also have an idea of a place called Yerushalayim Shel Mala. It's called the Jerusalem above. And the Jerusalem of above is directly above the Jerusalem which is on our planet. However, in the Jerusalem of above, the animals which are offered by the angel Michael, who is the high priest of the temple of above, the animals, in quotes, I shouldn't say animals, the offerings which are offered on the altar there are human souls of the righteous. Now remember, for an animal to have been brought in the temple, it had to be without a blemish. So a soul to be offered in the upper temple has to be without a blemish. So it is only the souls of the righteous, or those people that finally get it and do it right while they're down here and do not need to come back anymore, that their final last remnant of being, I like to use the analogy, if you ever watch somebody like smoke a cigarette, or I think you get even better like with a pipe, just the way the smoke kind of comes out and then it just disappears. So there's like the soul in the body, which is kind of, I guess, the tobacco still in the pipe. And then all of a sudden, exhale, the soul leaves the body and it comes out very alive. Oh, look, there's Gedalia. Oh, maybe not anymore. And then at that point, because the essence of all of us is from God. So at some point, hopefully in time, we reconnect to the ultimate essence of being one with God, in which place there's no room to be a Gedalia, because a Gedalia is separate from God, so to speak. But ultimately, when the soul can be elevated back to its most pure sense, that's when the consciousness that created Gedalia is now morphed into the unity of all godliness and reaches its divine highest level. No longer need to come back. So therefore, anyhow, everything can come back as a reincarnation. Now, let's take this to this side, and then we're going to go back to the other main thrust here, and that is the way we understand reincarnations operating in non-human form is because we distinguish between how something exists versus why it exists. How something exists in a human, you have respiratory, vascular systems, and all these other apparatus that make your body operate. If you were a flower, you would have other apparatus, xylem and phloem and all of, cellular and all these different things that make plants grow, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the how things exist. But really, why they exist is all the same, because it is inside God's vision. It's, or what we would call in Hebrew, ratzon, bless you. It's inside God's seeing. So therefore, God sees the rock just like it sees you, just like it sees me, just like it sees everything. And that seeing right? And God saw, and it was, or is, and will be. So that seeing is really why it exists. Once it comes into this world, it has a how it exists, but the why is that. That's why one of the things which we will not learn in this class, and I certainly don't even know how, but in certain very, very deep teachings in Kabbalah, one way to kill your enemy is to remove his or her soul from the body. Now, how do you do that? Well, I'm not going to really tell you how, and I don't really know. I've only tried a few times, and all I was able to do was just cripple somebody. No, kidding, chas v'shalom. But anyhow, oh, whoops, next. But how it works in principle is like this. I don't think the Kabbalists use this metaphor, but here we go. Soccer, football, right? European football, not American football. So in soccer, you have a goal, and you got a guy there standing. In fact, that's what I used to play also in soccer. I was the goalie for some time. And the goalie's job is when the other team comes and kicks the ball, you block the shot. So that goalie is your soul, and that goal is your body. So as long as you are home, meaning in front of the goal, you can protect it. But if you are too far away from the goal, then it's very easy to shoot the ball into the goal. So somebody who's a really evil person is very far from the godly goal that God created. They're way over here. So by simply so to speak, simply calling out the essence of this person's name, the sound that calls the name goes to the godly part of this person, which is really the goal. And since there's nobody home, it takes away the soul. And that's how the person dies, because they weren't home. Because if they had been a good person or righteous person, such a thing would not impact them. And therefore, it doesn't really matter where they are on the planet, right? You give this over to Interpol, things could probably change the whole world quickly, assuming, of course, they would use it only for holy purposes. But anyhow, that whole idea, therefore, is that in terms of the incarnation of the soul which lives inside the body, in terms of the way we do the rectifications, it's all about really understanding how do we look at the stories of our life and translate them into lessons. This is what the prophet Nathan was doing with King David. When he used the metaphor of the women with the woman with the sheep and so on, he was teaching us that in our lives, when we go upstairs after 120 years, they will not show us our lives. They will show us other stories. And once it's another person in another scenario, we're very objective. Comes to us, we're very subjective. Comes to judging somebody else, we're very objective. So therefore, we see ourselves as somebody else and we judge ourselves objectively. But if you built into your soul muscle the power to always give the benefit of the doubt, then even when you see this supposedly other person, you will give them the benefit of the doubt, and then it'll turn out to be you, and you just saved your own life. So that's the process of all this information, means that God now creates TV shows around us. Fight with your mother, a problem with your boyfriend, a problem with your girlfriend, my boss is hard, all these things. These are not distractions. These are vital lessons to see how well you build and grow your soul. Now, watch how this all comes together in the word for reincarnation. Gilgul, I think I mentioned this last class as well, means to roll, right? That's why we have in Hebrew gal, which is a wave, galgalim, or waves. So Gilgul means to roll. Okay, now there are two ways to relate to time. That's why I built up linear and nonlinear. It wasn't just for nothing. There are two ways to look at time. One is natural time, which is linear. That we talk about in Hebrew, Rosh Hashanah. Rosh, head, beginning of the Shana, year. But Shana also means Mishnah, Torah, to go over and over. It's the cycle. So the birth of the year of Rosh Hashanah is the natural order of all sciences, and that history repeats itself in the cyclic nature, food chains, ecosystems. It's all that process. But there's another beginning of time. Chodesh hazeh lechem. This will be to you the new month. And suddenly the new year goes across the circumference of the year, 6 months on the other side of the year, to the month of Nisan instead of Tishrei. And there's a new year here, the New Year's of months. And the word in Hebrew for month is the same word as new. So therefore, when a person can connect to that which is perpetually new, they are actually drawing from that which is above time. It's no longer cycles, it's absolute infinity of newness at every moment. And when a person aligns and connects to that infinity of newness at every moment, that is what aligns the soul for the ability to break the repetitive cycles of reincarnation. How does it happen? So the Balatanya explains as follows. You have two words very similar. One is called galut, which means exile. And the other one is called geula, which means redemption. Now, exile means coming back to that bad guy who wasn't standing in front of the goal and therefore his soul could get snatched. So that's exile. Exile doesn't mean you have to be in Egypt as a slave. Exile means you could be in this body, which could be like your Egypt, where the soul could be enslaved, because you might be enslaved to needing to have the new iPhone 5007. You could be enslaved to, I don't know, having the new Gucci Mucci Wucci or whatever it is. Those are things that enslave your soul to serve your body. That I use all my wisdom so I can become smarter than the other person, so I can make more money than the other person because I'm better than the other person. Really? I mean, do you think like when the worms come into the graveyards with their little napkins and forks and knives, oh, hey, come over here, come on, well, everybody come to this grave. This was a really important person. I don't think they think like that. There's no such thing like that. Everybody's important. Everybody's different. Everybody's created by the same God. It's only once you're involved in idolatry do you have one nation is more important than another nation, because my God's greater than your God. But if we're all created by the same God, then we're just simply like a beautiful garden where there are violets and there are roses and they're all made by the same gardener. So when you appreciate that, then your soul and your wisdom is no longer serving your body, but rather your body is serving your soul. And that becomes what we call the doing of the mitzvot. Doing with physical action, holy acts, brings all the spirituality inside of you. What do you actually mean to bring it inside of you? Well, let's look at it. The root of this word for exile, which is the same word as to roll, is Gimel Lamed, 33. Also happens to be the famous holiday of Lag BaOmer, but we're not going to go into that today. But this idea of 33, the Gimel, means 3 is once you have a tripod, you have something which is steady, right? You can't have a two-legged table. I mean, you could have a one-legged table, but once you have 3 always represents stability. And Lamed always means, like we talked about, the learning process. So therefore, the idea of this going over, rolling and rolling, is to identify every item and learn what its real purpose is. That's the learning lesson of going over and over. Even in your studies, when you go over your studies a second time, it's not like your first time. And when you do it a third time, it's not even like your first or second time. Each time you review your studies, you're putting the information together in a much more cohesive and usable way. So the going over and over is taking Gimel, each item, and learning about it. But when you have learned about it, then you open up yourself and you allow your godliness to be in the middle. That's the Hebrew letter Aleph for the Aluf, which means the master of the world. And when the Aleph is in the middle, that word means redemption. And that, if bringing holiness into one's incarnation is bringing godliness in a very holy, proper way, then it redeems. There's no need to come back for reincarnation. Okay, I had one last thing here, prepared for the class. A little, I hope you'll enjoy this. And that, because as I started off the class by saying we like to be scientists about spiritual issues. So if there's no real takeaway or practical, I mean, it's nice, and I don't know if you still have this, but remember when you want to wrap something breakable, you have this thing called bubble paper. So it's fun to go pop, 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 but after a while, it's like, it doesn't do anything. What are you doing? Nothing, right? Just nothingness. So I didn't want this to be nothingness. I wanted this to be somethingness. So this is a little booklet, which here I'm just going to open up the camera and I'll slide it through. Oh, it's not working. Okay. So this is a little booklet, which is in Hebrew, it's called the Shema Yisrael prayer, which is sped on the nighttime. So obviously they made this one. It's very cute. This is the boy one because it's in blue and the girl one's in pink, Anyhow, so here's a little picture of the night, and it has in here all the various prayers, which I don't think are really relevant. However, in the very, very first prayer, I guess what I don't know how to. I guess what I'll do is after our class, I'll email this to you, and then because I made it into a PDF. But for right now, I'm going to just take over the screen. Don't anybody move. I'm taking over the screen. Hold on 1 minute. Yeah, it's Sunday, All right, let's see here. Okay, so we'll just take a second. We'll just go through the Hebrew. Again, I really apologize. I try to modify the English so the Chinese would be a little bit more like realistic, but at least let's go through the Hebrew. So this is a prayer that we say every night, or should say every night before going to bed. It has nothing to do with being Jewish. I think every human being in the world should adopt the custom of saying this prayer before you return your soul to heaven at night. So I'll work you through the Hebrew. So Rabbanu Sha'olam means literally Ribbon, like the word rabbi, master of the world. Hareini, behold, Mochel v'soleach. There are two levels of forgiveness. Mechila is from the word mochel, which means to erase. In other words, to really, when you forgive all the damage. And slicha is another level of forgiveness, but it's more like if somebody accidentally bumps you when you walk by, you just say, okay, no problem. That's slicha. So behold, I forgive on every level. L'kol me, to all people, every person that angered me, or v'hiknit oti, or who attacked me in some way or another, or shechate kinegdi, or they sinned against me. Anyone who made me angry, anyone who attacked me, anyone who violated me, whether or not they did it bein begufi, whether or not they hit me in my body, bein bimoni, whether they damaged me financially, bein b'kvoidi, whether they violated my honor, or bein b'kol asher li, or no matter what was mine, if they hurt me. All of these people, bein ba'onis, if they did it with force, bein ba'ratzon, they did it intentionally, bein b'shogeg, they even did it accidentally, or bein b'mezi, they did it with real evil intent, bein b'dibor, whether or not they did so through their speech, or bein b'ma'aseh, or maybe they even did it with a physical act. Bein b'gilul zeh, meaning maybe this incarnation they have harmed me. Bein b'gilul acher, or maybe they had harmed me in an earlier incarnation. L'kol bar Yisrael. So again, because this is a Jewish prayer, it talks about Jews, but it's not limited to Jews. Therefore, to everyone who is my family, that's, I guess, how you would translate bar Yisrael. V'lo yonesh shum adam b'si. V'lo, and there should not be any punishment to anybody on my account. Don't take revenge, meaning God, do not punish somebody who has harmed me, because I forgive them. And therefore, since I forgive them for even possibly some of the most ridiculous things they've done for me, that doesn't mean, by the way, when you forgive somebody, that if you have a claim in court, you don't go to court. You still go to court, but you go without the emotional baggage. So therefore, Yehi Ratzon milfonecha, may it be your will before you, Hashem Elokai v'Elokai Avosai, God, the God of my fathers, Shalo Ehata Od, that I, therefore, should not ever sin again. When you bring me back to life tomorrow morning, may from that point on, I never make sins. Uma shechatisi lefonecha, and anything that I may have done wrong before you, mechok birachamecha, may it be erased through your mercy. Harabim, great mercy. But if you are going to erase, avalo al yedei isurin, please do not do so through suffering, o chalim ro'im, or through nightmares at night. And may it be that my words of my mouth and my meditations of my heart that are before you, God, who is my rock and my savior, the one who saves and guides me. So I hope that'll be helpful and useful. I will send that over. It's just something I thought about it because of the fact that in the language is the language of reincarnations, even how they may still continue to impact me. Now, again, if you're stuck in linear time, you say, hey, my dahava hava, that which happened has happened. Who cares about earlier incarnations? But when you're dealing in a non-linear time, then those ramifications can still play in effect. And therefore, that prayer is to be able to remove all of those various items. So anyhow, thank you all very much. I hope that was a little interesting or informative. And if not,
Thank
then
you, Gedalia.
yes, and if not, then in our next incarnation, we'll start again.
By the way, the bedtime prayer, we translated to Chinese in our WeChat account. And I think in the prayer, you say about something like Michael, Gabriel, and Uriah.
Yes, that's
right?
much later, though. That comes later.
Okay, so that's the one we translate into Chinese so that I can send that one to the people in the group.
Well, I'm going to send you now this one.
Okay, good. Okay.
But as long as you mention, I'll just take one more quick second. That prayer you're referring to refers to the four, let's say among the four most outstanding angels in heaven. I'm not sure if they're the number one, but certainly among the top, okay? Mm-hmm. And you talk in that prayer about them being on all four sides of you, like King Solomon did. It talks about King Solomon with the 60 men around him, mm-hmm. and so on. And then it talks about the four angels. So watch this. This is really cool. The angel on the right is Michael or Michael, because the name means Mi-K-Kel, who is like God. And it's on the right side because right side is God's kindness. Nobody, nothing has as much kind love as God. That's on the right. On the left side is Gabriel, which means Gibor Kel. As you know, I don't pronounce God's name. That's why I say Kel as opposed to the real name. So Gabriel is Gibor, means power, because the left side is power. But in Judaism, the power doesn't mean can I punch you in the face. That's a weak person. Somebody who uses violence is a weak person. Strength in Judaism is I don't punch you. I control myself. That requires strength. I don't yell. I don't get angry. I control myself. That's power. So that's the left side. Then I have in front of me Uriel, or light. So he's in front because he illuminates the light. And behind me is the fourth one, Raphael. Raphael is refuah, healing. So when things have gone bad and I need to get healed, that's when that angel And the word for healing in Hebrew is connected to the word soft. Raf is soft, because when a person is ill, they have disease. Disease is dis-ease. They have lost their inner peace and calm, right? They moved away from the goal. And therefore, returning the menucha, returning the Shabbat, returning the peace and the calm brings ease. It's soft. That which is hard becomes soft, and that creates the healing. Now, when these three angels show up at Abraham's tent, as Rashi points out, one of them is missing, because we said there's four. Which one was missing? Uriel wasn't there. The other three angels were. Why wasn't Uriel there? Because the Aleph, which is of the name Uriel, was now replaced with the Aleph of the name Avraham. So Avraham showed that man, which means human beings, not male, man could now be the source of godly light in this world. The same way that Uriel's light is the light in heaven, human beings could bring their light through their own becoming Avraham, bringing that light into this world. Now, watch this. If you take the four angels' names, in that prayer, it says, if you can surround yourself with these four angels, then you will have above your head the divine presence. How do you do it? How does that work? Like a little switch? I mean, how does it work? Let me screw this on better, right? How does it work? So the answer is, watch this. If you take the first letter of each one of these four angels, it spells the word Gomorrah, as in Talmud. G, Gabriel, M, Michael, R, Raphael, A, Uriel, Gemorah. So therefore, locked inside the Talmud, people's Talmud, locked inside the Talmud is the light and the wisdom that can open up the divine presence, which is what you need in order to bring the Aleph inside of yourself, as we spoke about, to change the word from exile into redemption. So that, since you mentioned that little prayer, I thought you might enjoy that as well. All right. Shay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right. Only good things. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.